Hello, welcome. Let's spend a few minutes with Via Negativa by Daniel Hornsby. This book was published this year in 2020, and I decided to read it because it's about a seeker, and I really love these books that are about people who go out and leave their lives and go out in search of a more meaningful life for themselves. So these books about seekers. This book is about Father Dan, who is I would say in his 60s, year-old priest who is in Indiana, and he belongs to a conservative diocese there, and he's really run afoul of the powers that be within this diocese, who have basically let him go because of some things that happened, and he therefore goes on this road trip in his car across from Indiana. His ultimate destination is Seattle, and he meets a lot of sort of interesting characters along the way and looks for the divine where it's not usually found, right? In Via Negativa. So I thought I would just describe a bit about the book. I want to be real careful to not give away anything that I think would detract from a first-time reader's experience with the book, but I thought I'd just read a little bit from the dust jacket to give you a kind of a description about what the book's about in general. It says, Father Dan is homeless. Dismissed by his conservative diocese for his eccentricity and insubordination, he's made his exile into a kind of pilgrimage, transforming his Toyota Camry into a mobile monk cell. Like the ascetic religious philosophers he idolizes, he intends to spend his trip in peaceful contemplation. But then he sees a minivan sideswipe a coyote. Unable to suppress his Franciscan impulses, he takes the wild animal in, wrapping its broken leg with an old t-shirt and feeding it Spam with a plastic spoon. By the time Dan gets to where he's going, he'll be forced to reckon once and for all with the great mistakes of his past, and he will have to decide, is penance better paid with revenge or with redemption? So I love these kind of stories that are, the spiritual journey type stories. And Father Dan, you would think as a priest, would have all the answers, and that's just not the case. He's, by this time in his life, got some regrets and got some things that have happened that he wishes that he had taken some different action than he did. And so he sets out on this journey, sort of coming to terms with all of these different things. Via Negativa is a concept that I think is really interesting. It's a theological concept. It is about finding the divine in the negative space. So when you take away everything else, there's the divine. So the way this has been practiced traditionally in Christianity anyway is through like Hermeticism, monks sort of retiring from the world, silence, fasting, this sort of practice. In the early church, the desert fathers and mothers, the early Christians who went out into the desert and lived in caves and things like that, they were practicing Via Negativa. And then Via Positiva is the different, it's like music and sacred art and architecture. This is all the positive way, but the negative way is taking away everything and then sort of in everything else away until you're left with the divine. There's a description here in the book that I thought I would read that really describes it fairly well. So let me just read that real quick. We call this tradition the Via Negativa, the negative way, or by way of denial. God in the dark, God in a cloud, a God in the corner of your eye. I agree with Oregon and everyone else. I hate the billboards. I hate that giant white cross in Effingham. He's talking about billboards he sees on his journey along the side of the road that says find Jesus and things like that. I don't like holy cards all that much. Even crucifixes bother me sometimes. If anything, all my vision seeking has only confirmed the paradox of God hiding perfectly in plain sight. If we want to see God in the world, all we have to do is see the world. If we want to see God in human form, look at people. Turn around, turn around. So I think, look around, turn around. I think what he's saying here, is like God, the divine is actually everywhere. It's like we don't see it because we're so busy and the world is so noisy that we don't really see it. So as the Father journeys on this journey with this coyote, we sort of meet other characters that we think maybe leading us to something divine or telling us something about the divine through their experiences and their stories. There's one that's shared in the book that I thought was really interesting. It's about a janitor who's telling the father's wearing his collar and stuff, so it sort of invites people that he meets in diners and places like that to just sort of spill their story, right? And one of them is a janitor. He was working as a janitor in an office building at night, and in one of the offices, there was a chessboard set up. So one night, sort of on a whim, his father had taught him chess. His father's hobby was chess, and his father had taught him chess. So, and on a whim, he makes the first move on this chessboard. And then when he returns the next night, there's been a counter move made, and then he makes a counter move, and so this goes on for a while, and he can remember each of the moves because the game has proceeded, so slowly. And so he happens to tell his father about it, who his father recognizes that they are playing a championship game between two world chess champions in the past that had been published. And so the father looks up the game, and it's been published. And so far, the moves match what they've been doing. But this was all the janitor did, was just doing this. He was not following this pattern. But then, he starts to follow the book. And so when that happens, the game stops. The other player stops playing and resets the chessboard. And so to me, what this was really trying to say is that, there's magic in the world that you can access. This game was magic. It was happening by magic, and there was a magic to it. But once that it became ritualized, once that the other person realized that he was just going to follow this, whatever was in this playbook, there was no more magic to the game. The game actually ceased to exist. The divine was no longer accessible. And so I think what the book was trying to tell us here, what the Father was trying to tell us here, was that the divine is approached the same way. So if you have a spiritual tradition, and you expect to just recite a practice of your spiritual tradition based on written texts or sort of rituals, you will not find the divine that way, likely, that there will be no magic to it, that the magic happens quite on its own. And so it happens unexpectedly. It happens when you're not actually trying to force it to happen. So that's kind of what I took away from that section, which I thought was really, really pretty cool. The father. So as he goes across the country, he starts in Indiana and goes, makes his way across the plains. On his way, his first stop's going to be to see his friend Paul in Colorado. But, he meets these interesting sort of people along the way. And these roadside attractions, to me, almost serve as pilgrimage spots. Like in the Middle Ages, people used to make pilgrimages where they would go a certain route, and see certain relics in certain places. Certain churches would be along the pilgrimage route. And, so this is a modern day pilgrimage. The Father has sort of set up his desert monk cell in his car, and he's traveling along and going to these different roadside attractions like the world's deepest well and the world's largest ball of paint. And so one of the other kind of magical things that I took away from the book was these Prairie Wizards. So he gets told about the Prairie Wizards at one of his stops. A couple of people tell him, "Oh, we thought you were going to be one of the Prairie Wizards." And the Prairie Wizards are actually these older men who just wander around. I think in the past they might have been called hobos, but they're just kind of wandering. They don't work. They just wander, sort of live off of the land as they go. And these, they're called Prairie Wizards. And there was something really magical about that, and on one view, just sort of the everyday mundane view of these people is just like, oh, well, they're just homeless people wandering around. But in the way that it was described in the book, it almost seemed like, there's a magic to them somehow, and there's more magic in the world than we know. So speaking of magic, another thing that I kind of thought about was this coyote. Like, why did the author choose this coyote to be the companion, the traveling companion of Father Dan? It's injured coyote. And I kind of wondered if it meant the coyote is an aspect of the divine. It's silent. It's a silent companion that doesn't speak. They don't speak, obviously, to each other, but yet they exchange something real, and something meaningful between the Father Dan and the coyote. And so there's something real there, even though it's not spoken and it's not expressed in words and language. But it also, the coyote is injured. And to me, that really sort of might represent Father Dan's injured faith, because he goes on this journey and he does have, when he starts out, he has an injured faith. So, yeah, I thought that was... kind of interesting. I'm not sure that's the case. That's just, it's interesting to me to think about why, the choice of the traveling companion to be this injured wild animal. So I thought that was cool. There's another quote from the book that I thought was really kind of nice. And it's, I think the holiest people are the ones who can leave everything behind in search of a true life. The apostles, St. Anthony, Evagrius, and the other desert fathers and mothers, Anna, the Prairie Wizards, the hitchhiker. These are all characters he met on his travels. I'm fascinated by them, I think, because I've always wanted to be like them and have always fallen short. Maybe he's not falling short now because he's sort of set out on this road now and is one of the people who's left everything behind and searching for a true life. And I think that's cool too. And like I mentioned earlier, I love a good story about people who've leave everything behind and go in search of a more meaningful life for themselves. All right. Well, before I completely run out of time, there is a one of the roadside attractions that the Father sees along the way is a giant ball of paint. It's the world's biggest ball of paint, world's largest ball of paint. And so I thought that was really interesting because it just, to me, it was so symbolic, could be symbolic of so many things. This ball of paint, it's this giant ball of paint hanging in a barn and somewhere, I think it was in Kansas, and you can agree to put another coat of paint on it, but you have to agree to paint the whole ball. But this little tiny thin layer of paint, one after the other, creates this giant ball. And, to me, that was like your life. Like your life is like one little layer of a day at a time, one little layer of paint at a day at a time. Doesn't seem like a lot at the time, but over time, that becomes your life, right? And the same thing goes for you as far as the world at large or the cosmos at large, is you're this one little small life doing this one little tiny small razor thin layer on society or on the world, and yet with everybody combined it creates a big giant ball of paint. So I thought that was really kind of interesting. I think I will leave the chat at that. I did enjoy this a lot. The size of this book's also really interesting because it's like a little devotional. I don't know if you can tell, but it's not a regular sized hardback. It's kind of small. And I really like the cover too, because we got the Via Negativa thing going on here, the black cover. Yet we got the stained glass window in the black, so we got the divine in the middle of nothingness. So I enjoyed reading this a lot. So glad that I decided to go ahead and get that read. My next chat is going to be Mildred Pierce by James M. Cain, and I am almost finished with this. I should have a chat on Mildred Pierce coming up very soon. So until next time, take care. Bye.